If you're new to whittling, you've probably experienced a situation where you thought a cut would work like this, but instead the result was this. In this video, I'll go through how wood grain can drastically alter the results you get from two basic cuts, the sweeping cut and the V-cut, and how to deal with that. This kind of a sweeping cut that makes for a continuous curve can be a little bit tricky to carve, because you're kind of forced into a situation where no matter which side you cut from, you're most likely going to cut a little bit against the grain. However, there is a way to make a curve like this pretty clean without changing your technique at all, basically. And that can be done somewhere where you don't have to cut against the grain in the same way. The grain goes this way, which means that if I cut this way, the blade doesn't get stuck in the same way. As you can see, over here, I am able to cut all the way from this side to the other side without the blade really getting stuck anywhere. Barely any effort. I don't have to focus on making small cuts. I don't have to focus on stopping the blade. I just go through the entire motion, and the result is very different from this. If I do the same thing over here, the same exact motion, it just doesn't work, okay? I can switch the side. So if you do end up in a situation where you absolutely have to make a curve like this, it is going to be much more difficult, but it can be done. If you still have a little bit of this kind of roughness over here, then it's just a matter of making very, very, very small and careful cuts to try to get rid of them. It's getting slightly better, but as you can see, it's much more delicate, it's much harder, and it takes a lot more time, and we're not even done yet. Okay, so just to make this point even more clear, I'm gonna do a little bit of a time test, and you can see how much easier it is to make a curve in a place like this compared to a curve in a place like this. 3, 2, 1, now. So this right here, it's not bad. It took me about 52 seconds. So yeah, it's not that much time. So let's compare it to a similar groove on this side in 3, 2, 1, now. I think that's about it. So, okay, that took only a few seconds. Yeah, there's a little mistake over there, which could have been fixed. Just like that. Technique-wise, much easier to make. Took a fraction of the time, and the result is better. This feels much smoother compared to this. So, something like 10 or 12 seconds with this compared to 52 seconds with this. It might not seem like a big deal, but when you're making something more complicated, it starts to matter a lot more. Even this easier version takes much more time. One thing to remember about this helpful strategy for making sweeping cuts is that it applies very well with sweeping cuts, but not necessarily so well with V-cuts. So here I can easily make a decent V-cut with the same wood grain direction that was a little bit challenging with the sweeping cut. But then over here, I can already feel a lot more force that resists the blade going into the wood. And it is not always a problem, but sometimes you get this. And unfortunately, you don't always have the option of avoiding places like this. So maybe I just have to make a V-cut over here. It feels like there's more resistance. It's not as clean. But luckily, there is something that you can do about it. Let's make another one. Just pressing directly into the wood takes a lot of effort. leaves a little bit of a rough surface. But then right next to it over here, with a slight change in technique, the blade goes in much easier. And as you can see, if you compare these two, the result is much nicer. Now, you might have noticed it already, but the difference is not pressing the blade with force directly into the wood like that, but instead sliding it. Now you can see here, I don't need to press very hard anymore, and the result is much nicer. It'll save a lot of energy. Perhaps you won't get as many blisters on your hands. You get a nicer finish. And it is also much safer, because whenever you need to put a lot of force into the wood, if for some reason the knife slips, that's a lot of force going somewhere that you might not want it to go. But when you're just gently slicing the wood like that, and it feels kind of like just slicing an apple, it's a better and safer option in basically every way.